Morning, everyone. This is Durwood Zelke. We're waiting for a few more minutes to make sure everyone who wants to get on is able to get on. And we'll talk about our favorite international agreement, the Montreal Protocol, what it's done and what more it can do for us.
All right, we have the agenda up and we are ready to begin. My name is Trina Torgerson from IGSD, and I will be helping with the side events. So if you have any questions, please make sure to send it in the chat to myself. The agenda should be up, but I will be unsharing my screen momentarily as we begin.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Trina. My name is Durwood Zelke. I'm the president of the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. I have the privilege of being the moderator for this morning's side event. And we'll discuss the 3 decades of success of the Montreal Protocol, what is widely regarded as the world's most effective environmental agreement, both because of its success in slowing down and beginning to reverse the threat to the stratospheric ozone layer posed by the ozone depleting substances, the ODS, the fluorinated gases that are regulated by this agreement. But it's also known as the most successful treaty because it has done more than any other agreement for climate protection. And it's done this, of course, as a collateral benefit of reducing the fluorinated gases, because they're both ozone depleters and powerful climate forcers. The 2007 paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, led by Hoos Velders with an extraordinary team, calculated that the efforts to reduce the fluorinated gases, starting with the early warning from Mario Molina, our great friend who passed away last October, and Sherry Rowland, that was followed by consumer boycotts. Some of us are old enough to remember that when we were using hairspray propelled by CFCs and underarm deodorant spray and bug spray. But there were consumer boycotts, some national measures, and finally the Montreal Protocol. And the effort to reduce the fluorinated gases managed to solve an amount of the climate problem as a collateral benefit that otherwise would have equaled what CO2 is causing today, somewhere between 25 and 76 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year. And that would have been total disaster for the world if we hadn't succeeded with the Montreal Protocol, and succeeded for 30 plus years. The treaty is known as a start and strengthen treaty because it started modestly. It succeeded with its initial goals. It gained confidence from that success. And then it, and I mean the parties, decided to do more, to strengthen their agreement over and over through a series of adjustments and 5 amendments, including the Kigali Amendment to phase down the HFCs. And the effort in 2007 to accelerate the phase out of HCFCs, followed by the Kigali Amendment, were efforts that were explicitly directed to climate protection. So the treaty shifted back in 2007, started a shift to move to the explicit climate protection as well as ozone protection. So that's a bit of the background, but I want to mention a couple more things about the climate imperative so that we understand why it's so important that we take this great treaty and think of what else it can do. Having done more than any other agreement, you have to ask the question, what else can it do for us? And the first reason that we have to ask this question is because time is so short. We are right now in a climate emergency. We are facing the possibility of the climate feedbacks that are self-reinforcing will soon take over, and the earth will warm itself beyond what humans can intervene with a chance of slowing down. And then we'll pass a series of tipping points. We'll enter what Rockstrom and other scientists have called the hothouse Earth, where many places will be too hot to live. This is a very, very dangerous moment. And we are not succeeding sufficiently with our other agreements. We're coming up on COP26. We've got to make that a success. But we have to have our sister agreements, starting with the Montreal Protocol, do their part. So that's a bit of further background. And now we will turn to the participants to give us their insights and comments on what more this great treaty can do. And we'll start with Dr. Kumar, and he'll be addressing with his background the energy efficiency part. And we, those of us who were there in Kigali, remember that immediately after the gavel came down, when Vincent Biruta declared that we had the Kigali Amendment, Morocco and Rwanda submitted a decision that said that the parties, in just a few minutes of discussion, agreed to, that said we are going to start explicitly looking at energy efficiency as well as ozone protection and the phase out of the refrigerants. And we've had several other decisions that have supported that. And we've also had some great work from the TEEP and the special task force on energy efficiency. So that's further background. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Kumar. Dr. Kumar.
Thank you, Durwood, for providing a wonderful context and some background for some of folks like us who have been participating in the Montreal Protocol deliberations over the last 5-6 years. As you mentioned, there is a rich history to this amazingly effective protocol. And I would like to extend first of all, I think, sorry about that. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who has joined in from around the world. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development and UNEP for extending this invitation to me. I'm Satish Kumar, President and Executive Director of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. And I and AEEE have been working on the topic of sustainable cooling and thermal comfort with various stakeholders, including government, private sector, and civil society organizations. As Durwood mentioned, I'm going to be focusing largely on the energy efficiency side of things, because that's the area where I have worked over the last 25 years and have made some contributions, especially in the context of the India Cooling Action Plan, because Government of India post-Kigali immediately announced its intent to develop the ICAP and was the first country to launch ICAP. And then over the last couple of years, I have been on the Energy Efficiency Task Force at TEEP as well. So with that, I would say that I think in our fight to tackle climate change, of course, reducing short-lived climate pollutants plays a crucial role. Methane, black carbon, tropospheric ozone, and some HFCs, which are commonly referred as, I think, short-lived climate pollutants, are, of course, potent emissions that pack a lot of punch over a short period of time, and hence, I think the focus on that. HFCs, of course, as Durwood mentioned, were considered a pretty key chemical in our fight against ozone. But then as our knowledge and as the science developed and as the complexity around management of refrigerants got intertwined with our goal to tackle climate change, it became pretty clear that we need to phase down and phase out HFCs as well. And of course, Kigali Agreement kickstarted this whole thing. So in India, HFCs, I think, will have to be phased down from all applications from 2028 onwards, as per the Kigali Agreement that has been signed. And for the nation of 3.5 billion people to be ready for this transition, it is vital to create and encourage a marketplace for cost-effective, low global warming potential refrigerants right now, so that they will be widely available by the time India's transition schedule begins. Early transition to low GWP refrigerants will also bring co-benefits of climate mitigation and energy efficiency. So some of the solutions for HFCs in refrigerants include managing leakage and recovery, enhancing energy efficiency within the space cooling, cold chain, and mobile air conditioning applications, and using alternative refrigerants and other not-in-kind technologies. So why is energy efficiency so critical to this transition? The global phase down of HFCs under the Kigali Agreement to the Montreal Protocol, we know could avoid 0.5 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100, and energy efficiency there can play a critical role. And by simultaneously improving the energy efficiency of cooling systems that is used in space cooling, cold chain, and mobile applications, as I mentioned, this climate benefit could potentially be double. To transition from HFCs, we need to make air conditioning sustainable, air conditioning and refrigeration. We need to take a holistic approach that not only addresses HFCs, but also considers energy efficiency, which can contribute, I think the energy consumption part of it can contribute up to 3 to 4x more carbon dioxide equivalent emissions than the HFCs. And that's one of the big drivers for bringing in energy efficiency into this. So harmonizing energy efficiency with the refrigerant transition for integrated climate action is one of the key underlying themes of the national cooling action plans that are getting developed under the aegis of the Montreal Protocol. And I've been fortunate to work on developing a methodology that the Cool Coalition under UNEP and SCAP have been developing, and which is also using some of the learnings from the India Cooling Action Plan. So moving on, I think this is particularly important development for India, considering that India's cooling demand is largely latent at this point of time. As per the India Cooling Action Plan that was launched in 2019, India's refrigerant-based cooling demand is projected to grow about 9x from 2017 in the next 20 years by 2037 and 38. And this creates a critical window of opportunity to increase the energy efficiency of new cooling equipment while transitioning to low GWP and low ODP refrigerants for maximizing climate benefit. As the penetration of air conditioning, and specifically room air conditioning, which is the key appliance in India, grows from 7 to 9%, that is about 40 million units in use today, to more than 400 million units in about 20 years, and which will lead to about 40% to 45% penetration of air conditioning technology. The impact of the cooling on the planet will eventually rise. I mean, that's a given. This also highlights that there is a lot of focus on active cooling, which largely uses refrigerants and remains the main priority for signatories to the Montreal Protocol, and rightly so. And I do want to highlight that while that remains a priority, I think especially for India, ensuring thermal comfort for all on a warming planet remains a major priority for Government of India, in the light of the fact that less than 50% of the Indian population are likely to have access to active air conditioning. The socioeconomic conditions also, I think, make AC technology out of bounds for hundreds of millions of Indians, and hence designing the passive cool buildings and incorporating energy efficiency principles that exploit the expanded thermal comfort range of people living in tropical countries will become absolutely critical, and will go hand in hand with our efforts to phase down and phase out HFCs in the future. In the short term, I also believe that eco-labeling is going to play an important role, which is something that some of the governments are starting to look at when they are designing the next set of standards and labeling programs, which largely has focused on electricity consumption, but is increasingly expected to take into account the global warming potential of the refrigerants as well. Um, this rise in cooling demand that is aligned with the developmental needs of a prospering economy has to be a factor in the impact of this rising demand. And apart from the climatic influences, the amount of energy needed to meet space cooling depends on the type and efficiency of the equipment and how it is operated. And decisions by building occupants and operators about appropriate operating temperature settings is relatively less understood and far less practiced, notwithstanding the considerable impact of cooling energy demand. And therefore, the adaptive thermal comfort, which is something that ASHRAE started to recognize starting in 2004, and which has become the basis for many of the energy conservation building codes, and increasingly for standards and labeling of appliances in countries like India and other tropical countries, becomes an important strategy to achieve energy savings by building scientists and research groups that the world over, from the world over, and offers a low-cost intervention opportunity to achieve energy savings through user adaptation and behavioral changes. It is clear that energy efficiency and refrigerant transition go hand in hand. And presently, in that context, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and Bureau of Indian Standard have started to address, I think, the energy efficiency through the MEPS and S&L program, and by bringing in the eco-labeling into the mix as well. Energy Conservation Building Code for residential and commercial facilities also plays an important role, and B leads that, whereas ozone cell addresses refrigerant transition through the HPMPs. In the Indian context, I do want to take just 1 minute to highlight the importance of thermal comfort for all and eco-labeling as two key drivers for achieving sustainable and smart cooling solutions for Indians. And eco-labeling could drive the market's attention towards green refrigerants and also usher in a new mode of collaborative research and technology transfer opportunities, and help India demonstrate leadership in innovative standards and labeling program. The ICAP also recommends that a single eco and environmental label should be used with which factors in global warming potential, ODP, safety and performance, and energy efficiency. And India is already taking concrete steps in this direction, as Bureau of Indian Standards is likely to constitute 34th Chemical Department Committee, also known as CHP 34, to look into the feasibility of developing a new eco-label shortly. Wrapping up, I would say that the latest Technology and Economic Assessment Panel report prepared for MOP 32 addresses new development, including best practices, availability, and cost of energy efficient RACs and heat pump technologies that support implementation of the Kigali Amendment. And it covers revisions of MEPS and S&L safety standards of low GWP refrigerants, a national directive to set point temperature to 24 degrees Celsius that has been initiated by Government of India, and role of global cooling price to bring about the private sector's contribution for fast tracking some of these technologies into the mainstream, and the role of national cooling action plans. These are covered in more detail to create awareness and provide technical guidance to parties around the world. We have to see that reducing emissions from SLCPs not only provides climate benefits, but can also lead to developmental impacts such as improved public health and agricultural benefits. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kumar, thank you very much. We gave you some extra time there because you had such an interesting presentation, and I hope we didn't take too much from the others, but thank you. Very, very instructive. And moving on now, we'll go to Yota Pacifico Ui from the Federated States of Micronesia, who will talk about accelerating the HFC phase down. And I'm going to have to pay a little more attention to the time, all of us here. So Yota, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Derwood, for the intro. I'd just like to say, Xelia Michael, greetings from Point Bay, Micronesia. I'm Yota Pacifico, and I'm the National Ozone Officer for the Federated States of Micronesia. I understand we might be behind on time, so I'll be succinct as possible. And yeah, if I could have the slide brought up by Trina, just worried that if I
It's loading right now.
Okay.
thank you.
Perfect. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Next slide, please. So my presentation is going over some of the findings I've done. First of all, thank you for to this panel. I'm amongst experts, and I won't see myself as an expert, but in my short stint as the National Ozone Officer, this is sort of the things that I've learned, gaining a better perspective on environmental policy, especially all the wonderful and wonderful things and success on the Montreal Protocol. And sort of this is my perspective from the big ocean state. So I found this, I was invited to do this presentation. I found this one study and just provided the findings on it that Rural hit in 2020 found that energy efficiency, improving in stationary cooling technologies could bring those added benefits, especially from the big ocean state perspective. Climate change is a big existential threat. So this is something how I can understand the climate change lens to how we can accelerate the things that we've seen, that the benefits of the Kigali Amendment, HFC phase down, energy efficiency. Now, I say there in the second point, with energy efficiency, I could defer to other experts who'll be talking about that, but electrical savings, especially for the future, would exceed 20% of future global electrical consumption. And of course, with that, combining HFC phase down, energy efficiency in stationary cooling technologies, and of course, the changing energy mix landscape of how we're moving towards greater global adoption of renewable energy so we can meet our NDCs and our climate goals. Putting that all together, let's see 411 and 631 gigograms CO2 equivalent reduction in greenhouse gas emissions 2018 to 2100. Next slide, please. So I wanted to understand how emissions can be further minimized in the buildings and cooling sector. I found this very interesting. The International Energy Association published their report in 2021 titled "The Future of Cooling." Found that air conditioners and electric fans used for cooling account for 20% of total electricity in buildings around the world today. So that sort of painted the picture for me and how much of a global impact we can have on emissions, given that electrical generation is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, source of greenhouse gas emissions, just burning fossil fuels for energy needs. So looking at the demand side options, the two that stuck out to me the most was energy efficiency. Of course, we've big champions under it, especially combining it with the Kigali Amendment benefits and adoption of low GWP refrigerants and emerging technology for the rack sector. What I found particularly interesting was that in Park et al. Report in 2020 found that reducing electricity sector emissions is through energy efficiency yields 2/3 of the reductions. For me, I always thought that low GWP refrigerants was the sort of catch-all in emission reductions for HFC phase down, but now I'm seeing that's in better understanding how energy efficiency plays a much greater role. And of course, from the energy side options, we see that renewable energy from carbon-free resources, wind, solar, big impact the past decade alone because of innovations in technology and financing has really boosted their adoption globally. Since 2010, according to Bloomberg, costs of solar panels has dropped dramatically with batteries by 80%. So I can see how having those things together, energy efficiency, low GWP refrigerants and emerging technology, and global adoption of renewable energy will play a big role in how we can fight against climate change. Next slide, please. So I wanted to understand for the future and what it looks like in terms of where these emissions are coming from. From the same report, IEA, Future of Cooling, found that the projected growth of electricity demand from the cooling sector for specifically space cooling accounts for 37%, followed by residential appliances. So that's another point I just wanted to touch upon, and how sort of comprehensive an HFC phase down to the Kigali Amendment and all the developments under it can have a really big impact in the future, and how what we are working all in the Kigali Amendment, how we're all working together can have a big, profound and immense benefits. Look at the next slide, projected for cooling appliance stock. We could see here that, I misspoke. Back to the other slide, please. You see here just how for space cooling, looking at projected cooling appliance stock, you could see there that the big increase as the world develops, people have higher incomes to afford cooling appliances. You see there that the biggest shareholders for future appliance stock is India, China, and Indonesia. So it's an important thing to think about and see how we can work together with those countries. Because by 2050, around 2/3 of the world's households will have an air conditioner, and China, India, and Indonesia will account for half of the total number in 2050. Next slide, please. So why is this important? You see here probably a very famous Keeling curve. This was a projection. The current CO2 concentration as of yesterday. You see that's an uptrend from the Pacific Island perspective. This is very, very worrying. It's an existential crisis. The acceleration of climate change needs accelerated solutions. And that's why it's, increasing climate change impacts in the Pacific Islands. And we see these trends in increasing air and global sea surface temperature. We have rising sea surface levels, increased incidence of tropical storms and typhoons. So we need these solutions that can outpace the devastation or the projected devastation file. These feedback loops, as Dr. Zelke alluded before in the beginning, how we're reaching these tipping points. So we have to act fast, and the HFC phase down together with energy efficiency could yield the greatest result. And it offers 1 degree Celsius in avoided warming, which is very, very significant. Next slide, please. So yes, making the most of the Montreal Protocol, still being an advocate in my position as the ozone officer, trying to use the best treaty on Earth, trying to direct more climate action, banging out pots and pans, saying we have an existential crisis, trying to galvanize more support, especially among my Pacific Islanders and ozone officers. We could do that through, greater support for faster implementation of the Montreal Protocol, energy efficiency, definitely a big one, and the life cycle management of gas and equipment banks. That's how we can get the greatest climate benefit. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the advantages of earlier phasing down of HFCs. I'm sure if with other experts will touch upon it, and I'll leave that up for you to review yourselves. Next slide, please. Also, some of the reasons why we need to accelerate the phase down, we need to have an early movers track in the NLF, support these countries who want to move and leapfrog to lower newer energy efficient appliances and low GL equipment, full acceleration and incentives for climate conscious countries, and disincentives for countries from increasing their consumption. Next slide. Yes, and this is just a few of my sources for you to consider yourself as well. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I should have mentioned at the introduction how important the Federated States of Micronesia has been in the recent history of the Montreal Protocol as the first country to propose the HCFC accelerated phase down back in 2007, along with other island states, and the same for the Kigali Amendment. So thank you very much. And that was an excellent presentation. I like accelerated climate change needs accelerated solutions. That's a good mantra for all of us. So thank you very much. We'll now turn to Marco Duran, lessons learned and opportunities linking energy efficiency and climate-friendly cooling. So from U4E and the Cool Coalition, Marco, over to you.
Thank you very much, Drew, and thank you very much to IGSD and the Secretariat for the invitation. It is really an honor to be among the speakers and the participants today. I'll be quickly sharing my presentation. And let me just, are we seeing, yeah, we seeing the full screen presentation or the presenters panel, just to make sure. Presenters panel.
Well, yeah, I can see it. Trina?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
There.
That's good, thank you.
Okay. So I wanted to bring certainly the idea of how many opportunities energy efficient and climate friendly cooling bring to reinforce the work that has been done in the Montreal Protocol, certainly with the entry of the Kigali Amendment as well, but also to raise to the attention, and like you're all experts or very well on this topic, but I just wanted to like remind like how cross-cutting cooling is. And by being as that cross-cutting, there's the efforts and the different things that are actually related are scattered across ministries and across sectors in the different countries. And we can certainly help progress these like very important international goals, Kigali Amendment, as mentioned before, the Paris Agreement, and climate action, which is something that Kigali brought, but also sustainable development goals. And why? Because we have seen it traditionally from different sectors, and like from the Montreal Protocol perspective, from a refrigerant point of view, technology, but not yet integrating, for example, energy efficiency that has been seen, for example, through ministries of energy and so on. Now, when we bring, for example, the cold chain, we're also talking about ministries of health, ministries of agriculture, food laws, and other sources of emissions as well, but other opportunities that can actually like be jointly progressed if we bring together all of this into the table, on the table. Okay, so as a response to that, and some of like, let's say, the initial efforts of trying to like bring together different stakeholders that have been discussing or that are involved in the cooling, we had the twinning workshops that were supported by many of the organizations that are participating here as trainers, and were led by U4E, and we basically in 2018 traveled to different regions and brought together all the developing and emerging economies, the national laws and officers and the energy policymakers to start discussing like what are the opportunities of working together. And then in 2019, the vision was to build a common understanding and to jumpstart some of this joint work. Then in 2019, we brought them all to Paris, and it was interesting because it was not only a regional perspective, but like in the breakouts or in the coffee breaks and so on, there were like there was a sharing of perspectives across regions and so on, which was quite interesting. And the vision there was to take action on policies, regulation, financial mechanisms, basically where were the opportunities there and how could action be taken. And we had in total 421 national laws and officers, energy policymakers and experts. And we hope that had helped and contributed to jumpstart some of the work. But now, as I was referring to before, there's even more. There are more conversations to be taken with people from climate change, people from agriculture, and so on. I would like to share also with my hat of U4E some of the experiences that we've had in the Caribbean and in Rwanda in supporting the development of the National Cooling Action Plan or National Cooling Strategy, our legacy name. But at the same time, also helping to transform the markets to energy efficient and climate friendly cooling, and particularly in this case, air conditioners and refrigerators. And this is just a highlight of the timeline of the projects where the work has been done on the ground, and we have contributed also with partners that have different efforts, and we're trying to pull all the things together to understand what is the need in terms of demand for cooling, but also what are the actions that these countries can take in order to transition. And we had consultation meetings, and a quick anecdote here, for example, in the final validation process in Jamaica, where we were discussing the National Cooling Action Plan recommendations, We had working groups, communications, awareness, policy, regulations, and like many sectors came, not only government, but also associations and so on. And it was interesting because they were like highlighting not only the gaps, but also what was their vision on what needed to be done at their level. And this is something that we have been integrating in these national cooling action plans, which at the end are helpful in order to have like a roadmap or a vision of what are the actions that can be taken. And coming to that topic, the national cooling action plans, and I like to show on the left, like some of the content and the work that goes through them, which we diagnose the national situation, we provide some of the context. And by the context, we bring together again, like, for example, climate change, refrigerants, energy efficiency, health, and so on, and cooling market overview as well to understand what that is. And then we provide recommendations. But the most important, some of the most important, let's say, benefits of this is that this works kind of like as a menu for countries to coordinate the work that they can do. Why? Because there will be agencies that will have some, let's say, proposals on advancing one area. There will be ministries that will have different projects as well to advance a different area. And then if they have a, let's say, a work plan and they have different recommendations, they can help organize who's going to be leading what efforts, and they can help reduce duplication as well, which is something we've seen a lot, because sometimes the government's kind of like the gatekeeper of some of this funding and some of these projects that come into the country, but sometimes in terms of capacity and the amount of people that they can actually have different specific expertise in all the areas, buildings and technology and refrigerants and so on, it's difficult to actually like organize it all. So this is one of the benefits that we see, for example, from having like a game plan in that sense. These projects, and just as an example of what was done, so there are already some implementation examples that are interesting as well. Rwanda has been certainly the namesake of the Kigali Amendment, and they are really important leaders in this aspect. They adopted their national cooling action plan in 2019, and they have started the implementation by already enforcing this early this year, maps and labels that integrate low GWP considerations as well. They have launched a communications campaign, and now they're establishing the Africa Center of Excellence for Sustainable Cold Chain as part of the recommendations that were done there, but also multiple efforts from different partners that are jointly working together and collaborating. In the Caribbean as well, even though the region has struggled with some other things such as hurricanes and different other aspects that have delayed some of the work in the different projects. For example, the Dominican Republic already integrated very comprehensive NDC, cooling considerations in their NDC, which is something quite important because they're already joining that. And at the same time, they integrated items from their HPMP and from the HFC phase down into the NDC as well, which is a proof of this collaboration and the conversations that were had. For example, financial mechanisms that have been designed in the project, some suppliers have already made them commercially available. Due to COVID, this is still like something that they're pitching, and we hope that it will ramp up. But it's something that is already in play. And Jamaica is evaluating district cooling technologies. As Satish mentioned, and I'm not going to like stay too long in this, we're developing a methodology to support countries to have a framework to understand, for example, that cooling is comprehensive, and to advance in assessing the different sectors, and also to have a framework like I said. And now, as a wrap up, and this is what is next. What are the opportunities that can be brought? Certainly, the twinning workshops are a platform to catalyze joint work, and this is something that we can continue having, and maybe under the framework of Montreal Protocol, maybe under another framework, but this is a very relevant aspect, I would say. To enable funding, some of these recommendations and some of the, let's say, the lack of not diligence but proactiveness at the ground is because there's no funding yet in order to, for example, continue with innovative financial mechanisms or to implement some of these recommendations. So it's important to start thinking about this funding. Then support deeper dive assessments of high impact sectors that have been identified through assessments and the National Cooling Action Plan, for example. Certainly, and it was mentioned already by Dr. Kumar, integrate low GWP energy efficiency, and also by Yota in MEPS, but also in sustainable procurement programs and incentives such as rebates or fiscal incentives as well. leverage building codes and other cooling demand reduction policies to avoid the necessity or the requirement to use the refrigerants in the first place, which is vital or fundamental to actually help even in the trend down of this. And then to build the right framework and policy environment for innovative financial mechanisms as well. And this is just a set of examples of the opportunities, but there's much more that can be actually achieved through these discussions and through these national assessments.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was terrific. And you are a great example of why UNEP is so important to the historic success of the Montreal Protocol and to its future success. So thank you. That was terrific.
Thank you very much.
We're barely on time. It just we're not going to have much time for discussion, but we're going to turn now to Professor Mark Sutton, who's going to talk about N2O up to 2030 and beyond, including how we might do this through the Montreal Protocol, another chemical that's both an ozone depleter and a climate forcer. So to you, Professor Sutton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Durwood. And really, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Although we can't drink a coffee together in the corridors, Durwood, at least COVID means we're on the e-systems and it's easy to get to the meetings. So this is my first Montreal Protocol associated meeting, and I'm not an ozone depleting person. I'm a scientist. I've traditionally worked on the ammonia in the atmosphere, actually an acid rain issue, a pollution issue, particularly closely with the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution based in Geneva, but also the last years working with the United Nations Environment Programme, establishing something called the International Nitrogen Management System, going to lots of UNEA, Committee of Permanent Representative meetings, etc. And through that process, in 2019, UNEA adopted the Resolution on Sustainable Nitrogen Management 4/14, and that's really put nitrogen now on the table with UNEP, and of course the joined up message about dealing with all nitrogen compounds. So here we have nitrous oxide, and a key thing about nitrous oxide, we know ozone depleting substance, greenhouse gas, but we know, of course, it's in the Vienna Convention, is not in the Montreal Protocol. Of course, its potential for the future. So I think let's just ask the question, should the Montreal Protocol be working on N2O? And there's no question, yes. Second question, should the Montreal Protocol go it alone on working on N2O? I would say no, and I'm going to explain why I think we have to do a joined up approach. And I think the first thing here is to say that when it comes to N2O control, there are a few technical sources, the adipic acid factories, etc., the industrial factories you can treat alone. But much of the N2O is due to systemic change of the global nitrogen cycle. And that means we've got to manage our whole nitrogen cycle better with more efficiency, less waste, and of course, less N2O at the same time. So you don't really get a really big hit on N2O by attacking N2O. To get the big hit on N2O, we have to attack the whole nitrogen cycle altogether. Now, in the European nitrogen assessment, we distill this down to water quality, air quality, greenhouse gas, ecosystem, stratospheric ozone. It's a multi-dimensional challenge. And if we look at it simply as a resource loss, that is something like $100 billion a year worth of nitrogen being wasted to the environment. Sorry, 200 billion. And we have a discussion with UNEP under the Colombo Declaration where the countries agreed an ambition to halve that, saving $100 billion a year. So we need a joined up approach. We need the win-wins. And this was really very clearly a message of the report we did some years ago, UNEP drawing down nitrous oxide report. That also means reducing sources like dinitrogen. You might think, what's the point of reducing dinitrogen emissions? That's denitrification. Well, the point is, the more of that nitrogen that goes to food production and energy production, the less fresh nitrogen we need in the system, a more efficient system, and less N2O as a result. So what's the way forward? Well, first off, I've already mentioned to you that we are working with UNEP, funded by the Global Environment Facility, on the International Nitrogen Management System that is bringing together evidence on tools and solutions, scenarios, measures. We're building together the first international nitrogen assessment. Great. But when it comes to the policy approach, what's the way forward? And we've been looking there across the board at nitrogen. We see 4 policy options with nitrogen generally. The first is that one framework takes the lead on behalf of all the others. Should it be the Montreal Protocol? Should it be the Climate Convention? Should it be the Air Convention or Convention on Biological Diversity? And the challenge there is it goes beyond the mandate because of all these links. So it's great for the conventions to be active, but it's hard for one to do everything. The second option is, should there be a nitrogen convention? And everybody says, well, we've got enough conventions, we don't need more. And the third option that we're really looking at is about coordination, moving forward to get everybody working together. And that's where the UNEA resolution is pointing towards inter-convention nitrogen coordination mechanism, INCOM, INCOM, which we're currently working on with UNEP. And we're really happy to have had engagement in that development process through the UNEP Nitrogen Working Group already with the UNEP Ozone Secretariat. It's been really great input. So that's what we're working on the way forward. And then I think then you have the question, well, how should INCOM work? And that's what we are developing, considering at the moment. How can it embrace goals? How can it mobilize all the different conventions for taking action, stratospheric ozone, climate, air quality, biodiversity? And we say we're pushing on all of them simultaneously. And let's say when we're in the climate room, we're saying work on nitrogen for climate and get the co-benefits for stratospheric ozone and air quality and biodiversity. In the Montreal Protocol, I would say work on it for N2O and get the co-benefits. And you're clearly used to that. So we've recently launched something called the Nitrogen for Net Zero initiative, coming forward up to COP26. We've similarly argued that this is not just the decade for ecosystem restoration, it's the decade for nitrogen action, going towards 2030. We will not get there by ignoring nitrogen. So there's a whole host of options on the table, and I think my encouragement is let's work together on this nitrogen challenge. We know that agriculture is one of the challenges. Wastewater is more than just technical measures. We need a whole systemic change to our nitrogen cycle. And we're only going to get that by working between our conventions together. Thanks very much.
Professor Sutton, that was brilliant and very concise. Thank you. You fit within the time scale. And obviously, there's so much more we need to talk about for the nitrogen cycle and for the adipic acid factories, but a very good overview. And I could see some competition among agreements for who's going to do the best job phasing down N2O. I think you set the stage for that, and the Montreal Protocol will be in that competition. So terrific. And now, do we have Marco Gonzalez? Has he managed to get on?
Yes, he is on. And Marco, I have unmuted you.
Okay, so
okay.
Marco Gonzalez, the previous
good morning to everybody.
All right, Marco, I'm just gonna, I think everybody knows you. And as the brilliant former executive secretary of the Montreal Protocol, one of the great champions of this agreement, and you're the perfect person for the wrap up here. So give us your words of wisdom in the remaining time.
Okay, I am calling from my mobile because was unable to connect problem. There is a problem with my WebEx, but I hope that you're listening okay. And thank you for the invitation. And it is at this hour in Costa Rica is pitch black. So it is my heartfelt thanks for the excellent presentations that bring light and hope for a better future. They were inspiring. The presentation has moved me to reflect on the critical juncture humankind is in. And then there is no doubt that we are facing a climate crisis or emergency, and that the global efforts to address it are eluding success so far. That said, it is also clear that we are making progress, and that progress is due in no small portion to the success of the Montreal Protocol, widely recognized as the most successful MEA, as Dorwood put it nicely and precisely in his introductory words. The evolutionary process of the Montreal Protocol is at the core of this success. Dr. Komar suggested in his presentation an alliance for an energy efficient economy, and a potential model for such an alliance is the CCAC that was partly masterminded within the Montreal Protocol, basically by representatives of the USA and the Nordic countries to deal with the important short-lived climate pollutants. Another example of this evolutionary process in the Montreal Protocol is the creation of the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, established by the need to further support developing countries in phasing down HFCs. Both are prime examples of new institutions conceived within the Montreal Protocol, and I do see potential for an alliance for energy efficient economy. Not only to advancing the fight to climate change, but for the sustainable development benefits of each and every country in the world. Nowadays, as Professor Sutton was saying, success in global environmental diplomacy is a rare species. But it is not so in the Montreal Protocol, and it is basically due to the principle of STAR and strengthen, a step-by-step approach designed to protect the ozone layer and the climate, since the adjustment to accelerate the phase-out of HCFCs was agreed in 2007. Based on the consistent advice of the assessment panels, parties by consensus have amended and adjusted the protocol practically on a continuous basis and have established a policy-driven ecosystem that is accomplishing its initial ambition of healing the ozone layer, but it is also helping to stop the climate change. Parties have succeeded in the Montreal Protocol in amending and adjusting the protocol to maximize ozone and climate protection. It is now the time to deliver on its promises to successfully achieve the MP contributions to stop the climate emergency. Some of the presentations have highlighted important opportunities that could be appropriately channeled through the Montreal Protocol institutions. Professor Sutton's presentations on N2O was indeed very informative and interesting. It is the MP experience that there will be tensions against new regulations, and mobilizing global action on N2O will surely face some opposition by industry or parties claiming either lack of alternatives or severe economic hardship. However, the Montreal Protocol assessment panels have provided in the past and will surely provide in the future all the relevant information to assist the parties in their decision-making process. International treaties anyhow evolve in stages, and parties to the Montreal Protocol have a great deal of experience moving through those stages. In concluding, I would like to list some additional opportunities that are currently being considered. The Montreal Protocol seems to be in a transition period. Energy efficiency and parallel implementation of the HCFC phase-out and HCFC phase-down plans are the most promising options to maximize the benefits of fast action under the Kigali Amendment. There are also important initiatives to expand collaboration between the Multilateral Fund and other financial institutions. There are also new ideas or initiatives to refocus and strengthen the assessment panels. In summary, I would say that there appears to be a space for new ozone and climate protection efforts, like controls on N2O and cooperation to recover and destroy banks of ODSs and to stop dumping of inefficient, obsolete cooling equipment. yes, I would say that there is room to harness the strength of the Montreal Protocol, and there is also confidence in several parties to gauge the opportunities, providing that those opportunities are well socialized and appropriately channeled in the Montreal Protocol policy-driven ecosystems. Good morning again, colleagues. Here is a little brighter now, and I thank you for your patience with my technological gadgets. Thank you.
Marco, we appreciate your calling in, even with the technology challenges in the middle of the night there, where it's still dark. But we recognize your voice, we recognize your wisdom, and thank you for the presentation that sums up how much more the Montreal Protocol can still do. I think that's our mantra here. We really don't have time for questions right now. Let me offer just a couple of final comments. The panelists, all of whom were terrific, I think if we were distilling some of the key messages, the need for speed comes out clearly. The decade for action, and action through sometimes new initiatives in the Montreal Protocol, sometimes with coordinated action. Another thing that comes through is the role of UNEP. Again, as the original proponent of this agreement under Dr. Tolba, but still doing brilliant work. And with the SDGs, with the energy efficiency, with cooling for all, UNEP is in a very good position. They're also hosting the Climate and Clean Air Coalition that Marco just mentioned. So the coordinating function of UNEP and its multiple initiatives becomes very, very important. And I think that comes through here. But we have to stretch ourselves. The world has already warmed at 1.2 degrees. We're racing towards 1.5, as our friend from Federated States of Micronesia said. We have accelerating climate impacts, and we need accelerated solutions. And the Montreal Protocol is well positioned, indeed, the best agreement the world has ever created, because of people like we've heard on this panel, and I'm sure many who are listening here, and others who with that, we are, Trina, I think our time was 1 hour. We're 3 minutes over, but do you have any final comments, Trina?
No, other than thank you to all the panelists for such a wonderful side event, and to all the attendees. We will be posting the recording on YouTube, and I will be sharing that link out. And thank you all for joining.
And if there are questions, please send them in, and we will try to answer them separately. We've run out of time for this, but we do always want to try to answer whatever the questions are. And I see at least one on why we should be accelerating the HFC phase down, and so we'll address that offline. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for your great presentations. Thank you for supporting the Montreal Protocol. Thank you for thinking about its future. So with that, let's sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.